All right, I don't know if anybody can see or hear me, but we're going to get started in just a few minutes. My screen says there are nearly 100 people out there, so hopefully that's the case. If you are out there, feel free to use the chat. I'd love to see where people are coming in from. So Sumanesh, if I'm saying your name correctly, you can see and hear. Thank you so much. It's good validation. Malta, all right. So I'm currently outside Nashville, Tennessee. Cool. Some representation from Denmark. We'll be there next month, by the way. For those of you, if you're not familiar, True Quality Roadshow is going to be in Copenhagen, in Denmark, next month. Quebec, Cyprus. All right. Hey, Helena. Hey, Chris. How are y'all doing today?
Thank you. We're doing fine.
How are you?
Great. We have people from all over the world coming in. New York, the Netherlands. Quite a bit of representation in the Netherlands, it seems like. Israel. Okay, that seems relatively new to me. Cool. Cincinnati, yes. I lived there about a year and a half ago, or maybe 2 years at this point. My wife's family from Cincinnati. I always give too much information away on these things. But we'll give just a few minutes. Well, actually, it looks like we may have a quorum, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen so that we can all be on the same page here. Continue to use the chat. Love to see that. And also, if you see someone from nearby or you want to say hi to somebody, feel free to use those emojis too, because it always makes people feel a little bit more welcome and seen if you want to do that. So hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on revolutionizing medical device trials with risk-based monitoring. My name is Etienne Nichols. I'm the medical device guru here at Greenlight Guru, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Today's session is going to run for about 60 minutes is the goal. We may stretch a little bit depending on the amount of questions we get. So if you have specific things you want to ask, definitely do that. I'll give you a short walkthrough on how to do that, how to use this interface. On the right side of your screen, a lot of you are already using the chat, which is awesome. There's another tab at the top where it says chat. Next to that is Q&A. Q&A is where you can ask questions that you definitely want the presenter to answer during the Q&A portion at the end of today's webinar. We might not be able to get all of your questions today, so if you have those questions, put that in the Q&A, and we will get to as many of those as we can. One other thing I'll say about that is even if you don't have a question, feel free to go over to the Q&A because you can vote on questions as well. So that way, if all of you vote on the different questions, we'll try to prioritize the ones that are most relevant to you, our audience. I'd like to share a few things about Greenlight Guru and why it is that we put on these free training sessions. Improving the quality of life for our customers and their patients is our mission at Greenlight Guru, likely a similar mission as many of you are who are joining us today. At Greenlight Guru, our goal and our focus is on moving medtech forward. That means helping you get your life-changing medical devices to market and keeping them there over time. We know the challenges that medical device companies face in this heavily regulated industry. So our solutions are designed to help streamline your processes so you can navigate those regulatory hurdles and succeed in the market. Greenlight Guru's MedTech suite provides quality management, product development, and clinical data management solutions, along with high quality training and education designed exclusively for medical devices. So if you're interested in seeing why over 1,200 of the world's leading medtech companies trust Greenlight Guru, head over to www.greenlight.guru after today's session and see a personalized demo. Today's webinar is going to be focused on risk-based monitoring in medical device studies and how it relates to clinical data. At Greenlight Guru, we built the leading toolbox for medtech clinical data collection. Specifically designed for medtech operations, Greenlight Guru Clinical is a single compliant platform for collection and management of clinical evidence, safety, and performance data. So if you're interested in learning more about this system, you can schedule a demo with us. Maybe even, if you're lucky, get a demo from the great Chris Rush himself, who's going to be on today's webinar. So let's talk about that. Let's turn our attention to today's presenters. And also, I want to apologize. We're having a technical difficulty. We've reloaded the slides multiple times. We're not able to get a Helene's picture. I don't know why, but we'll fix that for next time. But let me introduce to you Chris Rush. He's our solutions engineer at Greenlight Guru, and Helene Quie is the CEO at Qmed Consulting. Chris is a biomedical engineer based in Cincinnati, Ohio. We already saw in the chat, he spent about 12 years in the medical device space before joining Greenlight Guru. He spent a number of those years managing clinical studies for mostly class 3 implantable devices in pivotal and pre-market approval or PMA studies here in the US and around the world. Now Chris helps medical device companies of all shapes and sizes assess data capture tools for upcoming clinical studies. Helene Quie has a degree in sciences specialized within cell biology from the University of Odense. Helene has more than 25 years of experience within the pharma and medical device industries, working for companies such as Cook Medical, Lundbeck AS, Ambu AS, and Millimed AS. Her primary expertise is within the clinical and regulatory areas such as device development, quality management, project management, clinical trial execution, market access, and general management. And in 2006, she founded Qmed Consulting as a private consultancy company providing services within medical device development and clinical trials. We've done a few different things with Helene, so if you're interested in seeing previous things we've done with her, webinars, podcasts, feel free to reach out and we can get you those links as well. Okay, now for the part that you've all been waiting for, the featured content for today's webinar. It's my pleasure to hand it over to your presenters. Take it away, Helene and Chris.
Thank you very much. Let's see here.
Let me change the slides for you.
Thank you very much.
There you go.
So thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation again to present on the topic of risk-based monitoring debate, risk-based monitoring. And it's a pleasure of being here today and share my knowledge around this topic. It's a method that's been around for some years, but where we are still within the medical device sector, still trying to implement this. And today I will walk through some of the considerations to make and some general understanding of risk-based monitoring. And I would like to start out by also mentioning Naeem Nordin from Qmed Consulting, who has been supporting us along the way in the understanding of how to use risk-based monitoring for device studies. So let's move forward. Let's see if I can do this. Yeah. So I will go through some of the general principles and the regulations, how to use risk management and how to implement it in your tailored design of your medical device studies, and then share some of my knowledge within challenges and best practice and future directions. And I will try to, within the time that I have, to implement some cases from the real world. So let's get started. So principles of risk-based monitoring, what is it actually about? So we traditionally have been doing source data verification within clinical studies or for clinical studies to ensure that the quality of the data were appropriate and that the patient safety was fulfilled. So the risk-based monitoring is to use an adaptive approach to clinical trial monitoring and thereby focus your activities towards what really means something and where there is the greatest need to be sure that you have to ensure patient safety and data quality in general. So there are different types of monitoring. The on-site monitoring is the traditional type of monitoring. We have off-site monitoring and then centralized monitoring, and I'll just walk through this quickly. The different activities with on-site monitoring, as we know it, is that you go in person to a site, hospital or clinic. You evaluate in person the case report forms and the source data verification, and you get that sense of the quality of the data and how the study is conducted. You're also going to review the overall compliance level and how is the oversight of the investigator. This is one of the points that is really important these days and is requested from the authorities, that you have a good oversight as an investigator. You cannot leave your studies behind or unmanaged. Then you are engaging directly with the coordinators and at the site and with site staff in general. And you are able to verify both the facilities and the equipment and the overall quality of the conduct of the study. Then you are for sure is also able to see if the documentation is available at site. So the site files, all the documentations that are required according to the regulation and guidelines. And you are able to see or look for inconsistencies in the data, assess the site staff compliance and training, and the device accountability. So compared to that, you are also able to do some off-site monitoring, where you review data, that you review the EDC or the copies of the case report forms that you get in from the sites for completeness. We also you follow up with the sites regarding any questions that they may have. Make sure that you fulfill the timelines and the quality of the data that you receive from the sites. You can review the query resolution and that they are complete and that you understand these, and review of the case report form to check that the case that the study is actually following the compliance or the protocol, that you are compliant with the protocol according to the case report form. When you are monitoring sites, normally there will be action items that will be issued. These action items is also, you're able to follow these remotely and make sure that the site is taking action, or other stakeholders. And then very importantly, the recruitment and the enrollment, making sure that you have a frequent connection with the sites or the clinics and that they are recruiting according to the plan, or if there are any obstacles or problems in the enrollment, that you take immediate action, make a plan together with the site. And then you can conduct trainings also remotely of the site and stakeholders. Within centralized monitoring, this is slightly different because you are monitoring data quality and then the critical data that are reported. And this is different from both on-site and off-site, is you now differentiate critical data from all data. You are also proactively following up on certain data points for quality, safety, and operational risk. When we talk about centralized monitoring and risk-based monitoring, we are normally talking about critical data and critical processes, and I will come back to that. Based on that, you have identified some risk, or during the risk evaluation, you have identified some risk identifiers that will tell you through tracking the site performance, the data performance, and all these different parameters that you have upfront defined. These triggers, when they are out of range, or they basically get out of range, these will then trigger a visit to the site. So there can be several parameters. We have had studies where we have very few parameters, and also studies where we have maybe 20, 30 different parameters, and that we are following. And through some new technologies, kind of a supplement to the EDC platforms, we are able to then see on an ongoing basis when sites are getting out of range and when we have to go to the site. So it's a constantly analysis of the site performance, and also an analysis of the data and the quality of the data. So we are remotely evaluating the data, and we check for the completeness and that they are within range, and also that the data are distributed equally among the sites, that we have equal activities, and that we can take appropriate actions. We are also able to, through these the risk management process, identify if there are any sites that are of high risk, something could change that site, and that you see a change in the matrices that you have, and that will trigger an on-site visit or retraining. Normally, when you do risk-based monitoring, you need support from a biostatistician or other statistician that are able to identify data trends, and they will be part of your matrices that will oversee the conduct of your study. The last point here, conduct source datafication if possible. There are certain countries where this is not really possible. There are some competent authorities and ethics committees that don't allow that you share, or the hospital share, patient documentation on a high scale, except if there really something critical going on, such as an adverse event. So for instance, in Denmark, it's quite limited what source data that we can send from the hospital to a CRO, for example, or sponsor. So what regulatory frameworks do we have that can support our work? We for sure have the ISO standards, and where we have an introduction of the risk-based monitoring and risk associated with the device linked to the ISO 14971. So this is very nicely and elegantly documented in the ISO 14155, how to combine these two guidelines, or these two processes. FDA equally has some guidelines on quality of clinical trial data that are also relating or referring to risk-based monitoring. EMA, the European Medicines Agency, are also referring in their reflection papers on risk-based quality management of clinical trial to these new processes. And then I want to highlight the group Transcelerate paper that I was introduced to by Naeem Nordin that I mentioned before. This is where we actually had inspiration for a lot of the tools that we are using. It's very pharma-oriented, but there are a lot of practical information and processes, and I think that the quality of the work that they've been doing is quite high, and we simply picked bits and pieces from their way of understanding the process. And last, we have the Clinical Trial Transformation Initiative that are also referring to risk-based monitoring. So I will encourage you all to look into these sources for inspiration on how to set up your risk-based monitoring processes. So how does your risk-based monitoring differ from on-site monitoring? We touched on it before. Just to sum up here, it's a customized approach, and you are able to identify potential issues proactively through this risk assessment that you are conducting before that the study is actually being initiated, based on your protocol and other related documents. So it not requires, because it can be done using very simple tools, but larger studies and really complex studies with a lot of sites. There are several technology platforms that can be used, and I'm quite sure that Greenlight Guru will come and tell you about that after my presentation. So these triggers that you use for on-site monitoring is where you really have to put your focus on what is important, especially for your trial. What is it that will tell you and the team that the study is going a little bit out of focus? So this is what I will try and demonstrate during the last part of my presentation. But it is the centralized monitoring. It takes an integrated approach to assess risk and more appropriately allocate resources to the sites. So you're able to reduce, basically, with the risk-based approach, the number of site visits, and also thereby the economy in the study. It's quite expensive to run really large studies. So here you are able to, with the risk-based monitoring, to focus your resources, especially where you want the focus to be. I would also say that with the centralized monitoring into a risk-based approach, it takes some time to prepare for this. It's an extra process upfront, and I've seen a lot of sponsors, and now we have both small company and mid-sized companies we are working with, and there is a lot of companies that really are not aware about this process and might not have the time to set it up, and they misunderstand a little bit the concept of risk-based monitoring, because it comes with a lot of other activities that you will have to remember to do. So, but I will come back to that. When you've done your risk assessment, especially if you're using a technology platform, the algorithm that you will build in this technology will help you and also support you in, how do you say, in a more flexible manner, in a dynamic manner, to look at this certain risk, but also to change along the way and have other focus points if that comes up. So I think these are the most important. The outcome of centralized monitoring and statistical data review can trigger automated and non-automated intervention in the study. So you can both have, through these technology platforms that I'll show you in a short while, that you can take some actions, but as we mentioned before, these are also a way to initiate on-site visit or training, remote training, or other activities that you need to do to get the site up and running again or compliant. So again, you will be able to focus on lower cost resources, call to the sites. You have a specific topic to talk about. You can do remote monitoring, data review. You can ask the sites to have data available, and you can sit and do over a Teams call and review some of these activities that have been highlighted through your processes and your metrics that have pointed to a certain point that you would need to look for. And these can all be done without going to the site. Then you can always supplement with on-site source data verification to be sure that the patient safety and data integrity is upheld. So a combination is normally the best approach, but it really requires that you sit down and do the analysis that we will move into now. So I think for the sake of time, we already referred to the guidelines. We have both the ISO 14155, we have the FDA guidelines, which goes into the ICH GCP. What's important is for both the ISO and the GCP, we use the tool of a monitoring plan, and I will wrap up the presentation talking about the plan. This is where you explain the differentiation between on-site and remote monitoring, which is the output from your risk assessment. So the advantages with risk-based monitoring: focus on high-value activities, early detection, is real-time review because you have direct access to the EDC, and your metrics will tell you what to look for in a very large data set. You can focus on specific critical data and processes, ensure GCP compliance, reduce the cost, and then engage over a broader scope. I think, in my experience, engage several people in the quality of the data at site. So moving into the more process-oriented work. So how do you identify, assess the risk? So it's a three-step process. You have to first identify the critical variables, then assess the risk, and then develop your monitoring plan. The data are normally, or you will look at two different, or from two different angles. One is the actually critical data, and the other one is the critical processes. And both of these origin from, or is explained normally in the protocol. So you review the protocol and then identify either critical data or processes. Critical data are normally data that are critical to study findings, data that supports primary and secondary endpoints, or data related to subject safety. Critical process are processes that are critical for the reliability of the study findings. So related to ensuring subjects' safety and for which satisfy compliance with GCP and regulation. And I will come with some examples here. So critical data and processes could be a process is the informed consent process. So in many studies, this is considered as a relatively normal process. This is something that we all have to do. But let's say that you're working with a protocol where you have emergency patients enrolled. There, the risk of failure with the informed consent process is much higher than for maybe a more routine care study. Protocol eligibility criteria, the accountability of the device, study endpoint, protocol required safety assessment, and in general adverse event and serious adverse events. These are both a combination of critical data and processes as examples to be considered. Non-critical data could be concomitant treatments, demographics, some routine lab tests, and other processes which are really not of importance compared to the data points and processes just mentioned before. So when you have identified your critical data and processes, you do your you actually perform the risk assessment. You want to understand both the nature and the sources and potential causes of risk. So if you have done risk assessments before related to a device, the thought process is basically the same, but you just need to remember that you are talking about data and processes instead. So when you have that twisted in your mind, then it's actually quite straightforward. And as I mentioned before, this group, Transcelerase, has some very good tools where the risk assessment process is actually being described very nicely, related specifically to data and processes. Then risks should be then prioritized, both assessed and prioritized. And you're looking at the likelihood, so what we normally call probabilities. So how likely is it that the error is occurring? Then we're looking into the impact. What impact of such error on human subject protection and trial integrity? What is your evaluation or assessment? And then last, the detectability. So to what extent which such error would be detectable. So these are like we would normally rate any during any risk assessment. You need to find out if this risk is actually something that you should be considered as high risk or low risk. So when you have these three parameters in place, the impact, probability, and detectability, an overall score can be made. So as I just mentioned, high, medium, or low, or any other method that you can justify towards the authorities that you have used, as long as you have shown and documented the whole process of how you came to the high risk and the low risk, because you would need these parameters and the risk assessment, the output from the risk assessment as an input to your monitoring plan. You also need, when you have the high risk and the low risk and medium, of course, identified, you provide mitigation actions. So what do you want to provide of processes, methods, to be sure that this happens with a less likelihood, basically? Again, it's the same process with any normal risk assessment. You want to mitigate the likelihood that this happens, but you also want to be sure that you have documented, what if it actually happens, what would I do? So moving into the way to document this process of your risk management, the risk-based monitoring, how you identified the risk, how you have rated these risks, and the mitigations that goes into your monitoring plan. And in the monitoring plan, we have the process described for how to document the different aspects of a monitoring plan in the ISO 14155. And here you really you explain the ratio between on-site monitoring and off-site monitoring, and what activities have you, based on your analysis, what task or activities do you actually think belongs under each of these methods. So this is very important. The assessment doesn't go alone, and this is also why I would say very often you have to submit the monitoring plan together with your protocol to the ethics committee and competent authority. At least in some countries, this is a requirement. So what are the challenges and best practices? So one of the things that we have observed when we are part of a study or have been planning a study where we use risk-based monitoring is that it actually is a quite intensive process to get to that stage to actually save resources and money. So it is a fine balance, and it's a fine balance of not making it too complex. Really be very precise in when you want to use risk-based monitoring, when does it really make sense, and when is it maybe a little, I would call it overkill. The process is also when something requires time and resources, it also refers back to if there is a constraint in the personnel available, both to put this in place, but also to run the activities afterwards. And the problem that you might not have access to data on an ongoing basis, that the site resources are not available. It can be, if it gets too complex, the scalability to account for the different risk levels, it can be quite tricky. You kind of get lost because you the overall matrix of different parameters gets too complicated. And in general, you lose sometimes the focus on what's really important, even though that the risk-based monitoring is what it's all about, to get focus on the points that really matters. So the pitfalls, just to, I'm running short of time here, so I'll just make sure I get the last slide through here. Some of the pitfalls really to pay attention to, which is also documented in the literature, is that even though that you do risk-based monitoring, you forget to do some of the other activities. You just claim risk-based monitoring and remove your source data verification, but there should be other activities that you need to put in place to outweigh the lack of source data verification. Your risk evaluation needs to be objective. You have to consider the people, the background, and how they're related to both the project and the company. So as a pitfall 3, the buyers, do they have any interest in the financial setup of the study? And also, with any risk assessment, the outdating is really a problem, because a risk evaluation normally gets really complicated, and thereby there is maybe a tendency that companies forget to update it, or they don't have time, and then all of a sudden you don't have the right setup for an ongoing study. Data coming in late, and thereby if you data don't come in, or you don't have time to look at the data, or you don't have time to update, then you don't really see dangers coming in. So there is a danger towards the patient, and that the patient safety is at risk. The sites might not really buy into the risk-based monitoring and find it really difficult. I know the COVID epidemic changed that quite a lot, that we really got the sites engaging with this new method, but again, they have their daily life and they're not normally behind their screens. So how can we work this out together? And the same with the monitoring team. This about doing things in a different way is also a risk that you don't align on the different processes, and there is some resistance behind this. So just to demonstrate that these matrices Again, be sure it's also, for me at least, I've seen some of these technology platforms where you have the overview of the site, compliance, and the output from the risk-based approach. And it gets so complex that I can't hardly read basically what's going on with the study. And then you lose oversight. So what is the future bringing? Of course, it's always difficult to say much about the future, but at least within medical devices and this world with clinical studies, I think there is the risk-based monitoring is something that we should use much more, and especially now with the focus on post-market clinical follow-up studies. Risk-based monitoring is really a good approach to many of these studies, but it doesn't come alone. Remember, we have to have other methods set up to be sure that the safety towards the patients are still fulfilled and that we get the right quality of data, and otherwise it's a waste of time and money. From the regulatory side and also the industry, that we get more efficient in this process. I hope to see more initiatives, at least from up here in Nordics. Risk-based monitoring, and that's something that they talk about a lot. So I think it's really something that should be highlighted. And initiatives and the study design itself that can help implement the risk-based approach and other technology platforms, and then hopefully integrate much more the risk-based monitoring approach. That is really my wish for the future. And by that, I want to wrap up and say thank you very much and pass on the word to the next speaker, Chris.
Fantastic. I'll stop her sharing. And Chris, are you able to share your screen? Or do we have your deck here? There you go. Chris, I don't think we can hear you.
I was on mute. Let's jump back to the beginning here. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
So today I'll be sharing some insights from Greenlight Guru on risk-based monitoring from a technical standpoint. Helene was talking from more of the regulatory strategy approach. So I want to share some insights from the technology, how software technology specifically can help. So once you've developed a risk-based monitoring plan, the execution of that plan comes with some challenges that Helene alluded to a little bit earlier. So I want to revisit some of these challenges, and then we'll talk about how software technology specifically can address some of these challenges in the context of risk-based monitoring. So firstly, we often have dispersed study collaborators at the sponsor location, site locations, sometimes in different time zones, remote clinical monitors, and as Helene mentioned earlier, as remote work and clinical operations practices that are remnants from the COVID era really remain expected practice, we have to deal with decentralized study participants. Effective risk-based management or risk-based monitoring also requires real-time oversight of data entry timeliness and efficient data cleanup, querying activities. Data cleanup efforts can quickly become quite cumbersome to keep up with and really must be kept in check to ensure patient safety. Any delays in data entry could mean unnecessary risk exposure to patients. So quickly identifying any emerging issues related to recruitment, screening, enrollment at sites are necessary to minimize protocol deviations, enrolling subject enrollment that those subjects don't qualify for the study, etc. In timely corrective actions really is dependent on timely identification of any problems at sites related to recruitment, enrollment. And lastly, having technology systems in place to maintain focus on critical data while also properly reviewing non-critical data as defined in that risk-based monitoring plan. This can greatly reduce the administrative burden that efficient data monitoring plans can place upon clinical monitors, sponsored data managers who are prioritizing critical data and really are still held accountable to not missing those non-critical data review as laid out in that data management plan. As we think about software technologies, software tools that can bring operational efficiencies to successful risk-based monitoring, there are some, as we see it, must-haves. I call it some table stakes to make a poker reference. These are functionalities that are really non-negotiable, and sometimes they'll preclude homegrown database systems for capturing clinical data, and that's simply due to the ongoing software validation work that goes into developing these types of software systems. So firstly, EDC systems really must facilitate efficient data collection pursuant to good clinical practice standards, as well as patient privacy laws, which are listed here. Beyond these ISO standards, ICH, GCP, European privacy, the US-based HIPAA privacy laws, there are also local laws, local regulations that also apply, but typically these internationally accepted standards are usually sufficient for most every locality. The next bullet point here, all these systems really are intended to provide a central data repository for all study activity related to data entry, data processing, for all study collaborators. Really key is also ensuring that any changes to data are documented, any data verification activities, data review, querying, query resolution are all captured in an audit log. And then lastly, maintaining a system that is secure to prevent unauthorized use of data, both internally as well as externally. So having an EDC software platform, and when I say EDC, I'll try and spell out some of these acronyms, having an electronic data capture software tool that facilitates compliance with these standards and laws and provides these functionalities are essential for audit defense and really are a strong foundation for activities that are related to risk-based monitoring specifically. So let's take a look at specific functionalities of technology systems, technology EDC software platforms that help facilitate risk-based monitoring activities. So with dispersed study collaborators in different regions, sometimes different countries, web-based electronic data capture systems really have become the standard. They offer quick access, internet-based access to a single living source of truth of all of the data, including data entry, data cleanup, data monitoring. And modern EDC systems have unique login credentials for each study collaborator, with each user's activity captured in the audit log. And these audit logs are extensive. They capture every single action taken in the platform. So there's really no mystery as to who did what in the platform. There's really no hiding in modern EDC systems. This functionality allows sponsor teams to identify who is screening, who's enrolling subjects, who's entering data, and importantly, any individuals that are unintentionally or worst case scenario, intentionally taking actions leading to non-compliance from the study protocol can quickly be identified. And then taking corrective action can be highly targeted to specific sites, specific individuals that may need additional training, for instance. So when it comes to oversight of the timeliness and the quality of data entry, the real-time nature of modern EDC platforms allow for really necessary real-time oversight of timely data entry that risk-based monitoring demands. Additionally, software automations, so functionalities built into these tools can validate data entry in real time while data is being entered oftentimes. And this greatly enhances the quality of the incoming data. Another example, inclusion-exclusion criteria can be hard-coded requirements that notify in real time data entry participants of exclusionary responses, for instance, and also automatic exclusion from the study. So the system will auto exclude a subject that meets an exclusion criteria, can really minimize the possibility of excluded patients proceeding with study data capture. And ideally, minimizing or eliminating the possibility of protocol deviations related to enrollment. Comparing this with more manual data capture methods like paper or electronic paper, there are some general purpose software solutions out there. These types of solutions often have a time delay between data capture and data oversight due to things like transcription, etc. Uh, and though some of the general purpose software tools can offer real-time data validation functionalities, so validating data in real time as it's being entered, oftentimes the overall general purpose software system is not validated to GCP requirements for clinical studies. So there's a risk when it comes to audits of the EDC system overall being compliant with the regulations and standards that really define how clinical data is to be captured. So I want to show some examples as I go through some of these challenges and some of the solutions EDC systems can provide. So as an example of software tool capabilities, this is a screenshot here of how EDC platforms, how technology can assist with real-time oversight, which is going to be really key to successfully running risk-based monitoring strategies. So as we can see here in this slide here, the status of data entry. So these are all different subjects enrolled in this study, and these are all the visits, the scheduled visits for each of these subjects. Everything here is color coded, so it's pretty visually easy to navigate which data events are completed. This yellow data event is an incomplete data event. Blue, this is indicating this data event is activated, so it's ready for data entry. So pretty quickly, you can have some visibility at the site level as to the status of data entry. We do see there's some little flag icons overlaying these data events. So these are indicating queries, which again, queries can be automatically generated. So based on criteria that you as the sponsor define related to a specific question, that can auto-generate a query. And then of course, queries can be manually generated as well. And I mentioned exclusion criteria, reducing the risk of protocol deviations related therein. Here we see this first subject here is excluded. So an exclusion was met, the system is going to auto exclude that subject, and it's very clear from this view that that is the case. Additionally, monitoring the trends in data entry timeliness is greatly simplified by built-in reporting functionality in modern EDC software tools. So here's an example of a report listing visits for our London site. Let's see if yes, these are all London data events. And this is showing site-specific information on when data entry was scheduled to begin. So these are all, I believe, open data events. So it's showing when it was available for data entry as well as when it was completed. So you can get a very quick sense of the time delay from availability of data entry to when it was actually entered. And this information can really inform when corrective action may be needed at sites, specifically sites that perhaps are not being diligent with data entry. Getting into the next challenge here, so oversight of query resolution. Timely query resolution helps to ensure that risk-based monitoring really has its intended effect and identifies risks quickly based on clean data. Software tools are able to automatically generate queries, as we mentioned before, based on defined criteria. And manual queries alike, they're all tracked in the software, so there's really no missing or forgetting or losing queries when it comes to data cleanup tasks. And this built-in accountability really eases the burden of clinical project managers to hold sites and/or monitors accountable for timely resolution of queries. So purpose-built software tools, again, designed for clinical studies, have this oversight built in. So again, this is very similar to the first page that we saw a little bit earlier, identifying which visits have queries. Very easy to identify that within software tools like we're seeing here. There's also built-in reporting related to queries, as seen here, that really allows for oversight as to the timeliness of the queries and their responses. So I'm looking at all open queries here, so I'm seeing when they were created. This looks like it might be a little small or blurry, but functionality like this can really help project managers determine, which sites are being timely with query responses, and again, using that information to drive corrective action, whatever the case may be. And of course, one of the most important aspects of clinical study oversight, clinical activity oversight, is tracking enrollment trends. Really key to identifying high enrolling sites. When it comes to risk-based monitoring, specifically in that context, resourcing, monitor resources, planning those resources, understanding where those high enrolling sites are, as well as understanding low enrolling sites, which may warrant additional training, corrective action to try and boost enrollment. Again, luckily with modern technology, this information is again aggregated in a digestible format, which we'll take a look at here. Custom dashboards like we're seeing here can be really a daily or weekly resource for project managers to understand trends at sites. So we can see here, we've got some redacted information here, but monthly trending graphical information presented within dashboards for specifically here, site recruitment and enrollment. Beyond this, there's also built-in reporting with software tools that can also be used, for example, to, we're not seeing that here, but those types of reporting can assess what is driving screen failures, perhaps at a low enrolling site. And this may inform some corrective action. There may be additional training, that sort of thing, for initial patient screening even. And then lastly, really of high importance for risk-based monitoring, prioritizing the review of critical data that support primary, secondary endpoints, and/or are related to subject safety is really a key challenge that software technology can also address. Remote monitoring and tracking trending of this review activity, the actual data review, is built into software tools, and this can really remove a lot of the administrative or manual work required to distinguish which fields are critical and which are non-critical, and also ensuring that proper review, as defined in the monitoring plan, is actually completed. Some data must be 100% verified, and other data may not require such rigor. Within software tools, data field question response verification is performed within the EDC software tool, and the audit log will capture who did so and when. If a query is generated related to a verified field, that field reverts back to an unverified state. If a data field changes, that reverts back to an unverified state. So review of updated fields really can't be missed because the system has accountability like this built in. On top of that, there's also built-in reporting again, which can be utilized to create reports of key data elements, and then tracking of that verification status for each of those fields is built into tools like this. So here I've created a report for a specific field. This is an exclusion criteria, and specifically tracking the verification status of this particular high risk field. And you can really, sky's the limit, have a number of different reports for individual fields. You can combine fields into all one larger report, looking at a grouping of criteria or responses related to high-risk fields. Custom dashboards can further enhance the visibility into high, medium, low-risk data fields. And again, these can be really valuable tools to track the progress of data review. So I want to wrap my portion of the webinar here today. So just to conclude, software technologies, electronic data capture tools really can be a key element of success for successful risk-based monitoring approaches to proactively identify potential issues in a study. And feel free to reach out to us for a more in-depth demonstration on how our tools specifically can help the activities that you're performing. And with that, Etienne, I'm going to pass it back to you, and I appreciate the time here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So there are quite a few questions, and I'm just going to, we probably should have asked when we have multiple speakers, if they indicate who the question is for. So I'll just log that for feedback for myself in the future. But Diane Taylor asked the question, can you address risk-based monitoring as it applies to retrospective PMCF studies? So I'll let whoever wants to hit the buzzer, because I'm not sure who would rather answer this one, but just go ahead and volunteer yourself.
I can volunteer. For retrospective PMCF studies, we see a lot that the risk-based approach is actually applied, because these are data that are already collected, right? So you can't change, you can't, adjust. So for many of these studies, you do a risk assessment on the actual protocol, and you identify really critical points that you would go and do maybe a reduced source data verification on, or even not do any verification and leave it like that. So for sure, for these studies, it's really a valuable tool to do risk-based monitoring. I hope that answered the question.
Okay. Feel free to put in the chat if you have a follow-up question there. But Sonia asked the question, which topics or parameters should be defined as key risk indicators that trigger further actions, for example, on-site visits?
I think that I would always look into the informed consent process. I would look into safety parameters, endpoints. So how are you going to actually measure the success of your study and the treatment of the device? So these are the key parameters that I would look for and evaluate. How are they? How are the data collected for these processes? And what is the risk if they are, not collected properly?
And I would just add on top of that, if you're identifying emerging trends in data entry delay, query response, resolution delays, that could warrant something like that as well.
And I think actually for the Transcelerate, if people look into that that group of people that has worked a long time with risk-based monitoring, they have a list for inspiration when you sit with your protocol. So these are really valuable tools, and I will really encourage people to use it.
Fantastic. And just a reminder, those of you listening, feel free to ask those questions in the Q&A section. And even if you don't have a question, go ahead and go over there and you can upvote those questions as well. So I'm going to go a little out of order because I think this one was for Chris. And so his was towards the end. He might have not gotten as many votes just because he didn't have as much time for those to come in. But Alex asked the question, when you were going through, I don't remember what section of the software, but can users upload the harms list from the patient risk analysis to track outcomes observed versus predicted?
I'm not sure about that, Alex. Yeah, I'm not sure. I have an answer for you here today. That might be a good follow-up for me here.
Okay. So again, you
Great
all
question.
Can reach
yeah,
it.
You stumped me.
So I don't think we offer $20 to Stump the Guru anymore, but I've lost $20 on that before. So anyway, no, excellent question. Love it when you can ask a tough one. So if I'm saying your name correctly, Inbal asks, can you clarify whether source documents designed specifically for the study can be utilized directly as part of the case report form without the need for data transcription? If so, how would this be documented and monitored? Additionally, how would this approach be referenced within the protocol, and can we add this as a change after the study begins?
I can answer this one. You can, if you specify it upfront in your monitoring plan, have specific data sets that are only described in the, in the case report form. So there are no need for data transcription. Of course, high-risk studies, high-risk devices, you will not get that approved to do 100% without any data transcription. It's the whole idea with the transcription that and the movement of data. But they are not monitored because the source is in these data sheets. They're only one place, but clearly describe it. And you can also change it along the way if you see that it's of benefit for the study, with an amendment, of course.
This never happened to me. I got kicked out. Are you done answering? Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah, you're back.
Sorry about that. Thank you for your patience. Okay. I'm going to assume it was a great answer. I mean, fun.
It was super.
I believe it. I'm sorry I missed the last half. Broberger, if I'm saying your name correctly, do I need a risk assessment tool or something like the FMEA? I believe this question came in towards the first half, Helena, when I don't remember exactly the topic of conversation, but let you take a stab
I think
at that one.
It is similar to the FMEA tool. And again, Transcelerase has already a tool that is adapted towards risk-based monitoring. So I will encourage people to go and look there, but it's the same principle. So, again, the data and the processes are different than what you use in a normal risk assessment for a device.
Okay. Alex asked a question. I think Alex is the guy who's trying to stump us, which is great, but I think we can get this one. And I just moved it into a different area. Let's see here. Here we go. I got the impression that when you mention risks, you're not talking only risks of patient harm, but also risks in terms of the success of the clinical trial itself. Would you agree? And maybe a question behind the question is all of the different risks we should be monitoring. Any thoughts to add?
I can confirm, it's risk in terms of success of a clinical trial, and that you use your resources at the right places and the money, basically. Because there are some of these monitoring processes that gives very little value. Of course, for some studies, it's required 100% source data verification, but for others, it's unnecessary. So I agree.
Very cool. That's always an interesting topic, is like what are the different areas of risk that we should cover? So that's very good. Bala asked, it's very information dense. Wouldn't it be more efficient to show only anomalous data? So this is when you were showing the software, Chris. I don't remember again on what page specifically, but one of those more information dense pages.
Yeah, good question. So within software tools, you typically are going to have built-in functionalities, and then you'll have custom functionalities. And when it comes to like showing, as we probably saw on the screen you were referring to, looking at a specific criteria, I probably had them all listed there. Custom reports, custom dashboards. That's typically where you're this type of requirement, looking at just anomalous stuff. Presenting that is oftentimes done in like a custom way, having that in a dashboard. So it is possible to answer your question.
Okay. Let's do one more. Well, maybe two more, but let's see how this one goes. Regarding the last question on data transcription and source documents, does this apply for decentralized studies as well?
I just need to read that again.
Yeah.
Regarding the last question. No, that applies for all. So you have study data that you only have one place. You don't have it in the patient files, and you just have it on the either the EDC or the paper case report form. These are special data points that you have permission from the authorities and the ethics committee to just have one place.
Okay. All right. Let's do one last one. We're almost at time here, but Hasser, if I get the name right, please may ask, in terms of terminology, which is more common, remote monitoring or offsite monitoring? Do you have an opinion or thought?
I think it's probably becoming more and more a mix of both. When I was working on trials 10 years ago, it was probably a lot of on-site monitoring. And as software tools become kind of more widely available, there's more of a mix, I'd say, but I don't think there's ever going to be a replacement for on-site visits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you both so much for the informative presentation. Thank you for all the valuable insights during the Q&A. To the audience, thank you for your patience and for your questions, actually, and for all the engagement. That was fantastic. One final reminder, today's recording and presentation slides will be sent to you in the following days, so keep an eye out for that email. Really appreciate you all attending, and I wish you the best, and we'll see you at the next one. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.